Hello, hello, everyone out there. This is Unfiltered Conversations, and I'm with the one, the only, the man with the plan, Mark. Mark is someone who just researching him has been I guess, a beacon of hope when it comes to anything when we're talking about Parkinson's and when we're talking about, you know, um, developing who you are. And it's kind of he has an interesting story, but I'm not gonna tell it. I want him to introduce himself and tell his story. And as we move forward. So Mark, thank you for being on the show. I appreciate you.
Thanks, Michael, for having me. Definitely. Well, yeah, essentially, I started off life on a military base in North Carolina called Camp Lejeune, which now is famous for its water contamination,
Yeah.
unfortunately, and a lot of lawsuits going on there, a lot of things. But one of the biggest things that came out of it was that 70% of the people that come out of Camp Lejeune actually get Parkinson's.
Wow.
The water was contaminated so bad, and I was born there on the base. So I have Parkinson's and I carry the gene for Alzheimer's. So I also got Alzheimer's. So I had two neurological effects at the same time
Jeez.
hitting me. And
Yeah,
wow,
no.
that's a whammy. I got to
It
tell you,
is.
that's rough for anybody. I
Yeah.
kind of kid around it, you have to. I always tell people, well, if I fall down from the Parkinson's, at least from the Alzheimer's, I can't remember why.
Yeah, but that's a terrible joke. I like your humor though. I like the dark humor.
But it's horrible for caretakers, it's horrible for people who get these diseases, and dementia is part of that, and I just could not accept the fact that I had this disease, Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, and being diagnosed by a neurologist who basically just said, "It's a medicine we've been giving out since the '60s. It doesn't really work. We actually have this thing, and you'll
Uh,
like this." They call it the honeymoon effect. And I said, "What is the honeymoon effect?" He goes, "Well, it'll last as long as a honeymoon." Okay. So in about 5 years, the medicine isn't gonna work anymore, and you get worse, and this is because the dopamine in the brain keeps dying the cells, so it's sorta like insulin. If you're taking insulin, you might have to take more and more to try to control your diabetes, so the similarities are very much there. I just couldn't accept that. I'm the kind of person there's 2 kind of people I am. Number 1, my father was a master sergeant at Camp Lejeune. So there's that, where
yeah.
dad tells you, you storm the beach, you storm the beach.
I mean,
If you got a problem, you take it on full power. You don't hold. And
yeah.
then I had my own entrepreneur side because as I got started in life, I became a database programmer way back in 1975, which was unheard of at that time. I taught myself how to program and do development work. I couldn't find a college to go to. They all wanted to teach me Fortran and COBOL, and I was like, "This stuff is really old. I don't want to learn this old stuff. What am I paying these people money for?" I hacked into the University of Maryland's mainframe, which probably was one of the first hackers from my high school. And from my high school, the guidance counselor never used the computer. They didn't know how, and I
Yeah.
wasn't allowed to because it wasn't in trigonometry. So basically, I knew a guy in trig, and he says, "Well, here's the password. You can use the same computer. It's just a terminal." And it goes into the University of Maryland's mainframe. So I got in there. I taught myself how to program. I skipped classes, and my whole high school turned into my own database class that I made myself.
Wow.
And that's how I learned the code. And from there, went on and started a successful business doing programming and development for companies. And
Yeah.
for everyone out there listening, I mean, if you're starting a company or you're doing things, you really have to look through those kind of things. Like, how do you do this? And how do I get from point A to point B? And I guess I learned really early on, if I had gone to any of the places we actually worked for and said, "I want a job," they would have said, "You don't have a degree, you
Yeah.
don't get a job." But if you start a company, what's really weird about that, if you start a
Mm.
company and then you hire some programmers who are also misfits, just like me. Okay, they also hadn't gone to school, but they were really good at what they did. I hired them. We started the company, and we called it Application Programming and Development Inc. And we went out there and said, "We do programming." And what was comical was nobody ever asked us for our degree because they said, "Look, you guys are a
They
company."
just wanted results. That's
you
all
guys
he
know how to
wanted.
program. That's why you guys call yourself programmers, right? And it was weird, but we got a lot of jobs. And then once you get a few jobs under your belt, you then all of a sudden start building up client base. And that really worked for us. We worked for huge clients and developed a lot of things. So later in life, when I retired from that and in my about 65, and I really came down with Parkinson's bad, and I was having the Alzheimer's issues, and I knew I was in trouble from the Camp Lejeune situation. I just brought back that ability in a database. When you program in a database or any programming, you look at a blank screen. And when you look at that blank screen, you have to figure out where you're going, how you're going to build it, what you're going to do, and you just start. You start building and coming up with things. And basically, I did the same thing with the product I have now, my Brain Restore, where I literally read a fantastic science research on mice that had cured mice from Parkinson's, Alzheimer's,
Mhm.
and dementia with Lewy bodies, which is very difficult. And they cured them all, and they couldn't make it into a $10,000 a month drug. They could not figure out how it worked, but it was a
Uh,
natural product. And it wasn't a very easy natural product to find. But I was like, I want that. That's what I want, because I want what the mice had. And right. And I said, well, it might not work, but if it does, I'm the next mouse, and I'm okay with that. And I got the product in January of 2025. I sourced it. I came up with a way to mill it and make it work the way I wanted to. I had to set up my suppliers and everything. And then I started taking it, and in 6 months, I was already at level what they call stage 3 Parkinson's. So you're like one step away from using the walker. Okay, that's how close I was. And I was falling a lot. I was hurting myself a lot, which is not unusual with Parkinson's. Uh, and I started taking this every day, figured out my dosage, figured out the way to make it, and I signed up for the Michael J. Fox run in Washington D.C. in June of 2025, and I ran that marathon. Something I had never done before. I never ran before. I never did fast walking. I was a couch potato. I drink, my cherry Coke or whatever, and I'm on the computer at the time. So I was not the you know perfect person for this, right? But as I got through and got a medal at the end, handed to me from the Michael
yeah.
J. Fox group, I was like, wow, I just completed something that no one else could do. And it was actually where I got my first sales. People actually said, hey, what are you taking? Because wow, you just did pretty good, and you're more advanced than some of us, they're out here doing this. And I told them, and they said, well, how do we get it? I said, well, I haven't really set up for production, but I guess I'll come out of retirement and start building a business. So I built MyBrainRestore.com, and literally the first bottles we shipped out, this should focus in a second. They were like this, completely. I have no labels. I have
Yeah.
nothing. If you want it, here you go. And
Yeah.
and now it looks quite mature, and now has a nice label. And we
Okay,
have
and,
all
yeah,
kinds.
with and supplemental fact yeah, okay.
Yep, a supplement. We just got on Amazon. We're now shipping to 6 countries, around the world. I just got asked from someone from Indonesia if I could ship there. The product is doing extremely well, and I even noticed that some of my people coming in my website had DR in front of their name. And I'm like, "Wait a minute, he's just a doctor," you know? And I finally got to talk to 2 of them, and one of them was a retired, neurosurgeon,
Mhm.
and I said, "Well, why are you ordering my product? You of all people," and
Yeah.
he goes, "No, because it works." And there's nothing else that does. And I know the brain can repair itself if it's allowed to, if it has
Yeah.
the right things. It has just the right elements have to be there, and you figured it out. So I'm taking your product. So and then we had other people too, come in with other things that happened to them and changes that happened to them. And personally, I had lost a friend of mine from
Mm,
dementia and Parkinson's. He had dementia and
mm,
Parkinson's, and I just saw him deteriorate and die. And that was
Wow.
a horrible thing for him. His wife was beside herself trying to take care of him, trying to give him all the medicines, and none of the medicines worked. I mean, they had huge side effects. They were terribly expensive and didn't do anything for it. And, I just wasn't prepared for that. To me, that's where the entrepreneur part kicked in, the Marine part kicked in. All those elements said, get up, do something about it. So
Yeah.
I guess my encouragement to everybody out there, whether you're starting a business or you're dealing with something like a neurological disease, you really have to study. You really have to look at things. You have to look at the cutting edge things so that you can grow, with this. And there's always something out there. We have so much information now. It's information overload. But if you look for what you need to look for, you'll probably find it.
I do have a question for you.
Sure.
Right? That Japanese study that you was talking about that inspired you to come up and use that product and now make it, my brain restore, showing that full reversal in mice that you was discussing. Like what barriers did you have to that you ran into with that study? One, you had to synthesize the that supplement, right? And then also you had to calculate how much you should take according to your body chemistry.
According to
Now
a
make a
mouse.
general yeah, 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 so, like, barriers are you still running into those barriers because now you're shipping out to, like you said, 6 countries, Indonesia is signing up for it now, so, what's on the horizon?
Sure, sure. Well, to answer your questions, the mice studies intrigued me at a level where it was really that aha moment where you look at it and
Mhm.
you go, how could one thing cure three neurological diseases? That
Yeah,
part right there was like, I had never heard of any study, you know, in medical journals that says, oh, we cured 100% of three different diseases. That
yeah,
just like, how's that possible?
yeah,
So that was huge because a lot of drug companies will start something if they cure 35% of the mice. They're like
mhm,
satisfied with that. Hey, that's
yep,
good enough. Make the drug and probably got a lot of side effects and stuff like this. But there was no reported side effects from the mice on this. Matter of fact, they eventually at the end gave the control mice the same ingredient, the same natural ingredient, and they got 20% sharper running mazes. So this
yeah,
means it could be a preventive, it could be used for other things.
yeah,
Even the scientists pointed out this has a much wider implications of what's going on. But there was still a thing in my head like, well, they dissected the mice, and I didn't sign up for that part. I figured that might be a little tough. So I let the mice take that one. But
yeah,
what they found what they was, that there was all these tendrils and all these amyloid plaques and everything that creates these problems were gone.
yeah,
So where did they go? That was my
yeah,
next thing. It was like, okay, if they're gone and the scientists didn't figure out where they went, they didn't really go that deep. That wasn't their point. Their point was to try to make a synthetic version of this so that they could turn it into a drug. That was the whole point of this. Um, I then studied about a new in the medical world, a new system called the glymphatic system.
mhm,
Now, like the lymphatic system and the circulatory system, those systems are most people will know blood, veins and arteries and things of that sort. And then there's a lymphatic system, which is sometimes if you get a burn and you'll see that white, that clear fluid or something. That's sometimes the lymphatic pouring in, trying to protect that area.
yeah, yeah,
But the glymphatic was something in 2012, a Norwegian scientist said, this is interesting because what it does, it surrounds all those cells in the brain and it helps clean them. And they even nicknamed it the dishwasher of the brain. That was sort of its cute name that the scientists gave it. But 2012 was not very long in the medical field. I mean, that's a very short time, and no one had time to really get deep into it. But he'd said, this is the cleaner. This is what keeps all those things stuck in the brain,
mhm,
and gets them out. But he had no way to clear it. He knew it existed, but he didn't know about the mice studies because they hadn't been done yet. Okay.
uh,
So then in 2025, in May, in the United States, with another animal, a different animal, they also saw the same effect happening in Alzheimer's, these animals getting like an Alzheimer's disease. And they looked and it was the glymphatic system that was stuck. So all I did was basically put the two together and say, well, that has to be it. How do I test it without getting dissected? Um, you know, I mean, you got to think, okay, how far am I going with this? And what I found out was there was two things. Number one, there was the neurologist saying, "Wow, your tremors are gone. You're doing better." And I'm saying,
Mhm.
"I'm not taking your medicine. I'm taking my supplement, my brain restore." She goes, "Keep taking it. I'm not going to stop you. I have no idea what it's doing, but whatever it's doing, it's
Doing
working."
this.
Yeah, yeah. So stick with what you're doing. Okay. But then I said, well, how do I quantify this from a medical standpoint?
Yeah.
And there is a test called an amyloid beta 42 test, which tests the ratio of amyloid beta plaques in your blood. Now, the lower it goes, it says it's getting stuck in the brain. And this is usually associated with Alzheimer's. However, it is now being associated with dementia and with Parkinson's. So, again, we have a common pathway here again. And so I asked my doctor, I had taken that test in 2023, to see that I had Alzheimer's, and sure enough, it was bad. And interestingly, on 23andMe, the genetic site, it also popped up and said, "Oh, by the way, you carry one of the worst, PEO4 markers for Alzheimer's. Good luck."
Right.
Thank you so much. Thank you for telling me. So I knew that, well, that test might tell me something. So I'd already gotten the test prior to taking my brain restore. And I
Mhm.
went back to the doctor and I said, I want to retake that test, because I think things have changed. I'm smarter, sharper. You see how I am now. I would not have been able to do this a year ago. Okay. That's how bad it was. I mean, I might not have remembered your name or remembered to be in a podcast. And I would have been shaking, so it wouldn't have been good. But I asked my doctor to redo that. They wouldn't redo it because they said, well, there's no way to reverse it. So I'm not going to order a test that can't be reversed. And then I went to another doctor and they said the same thing. I Googled it, and you can Google, can you reverse the amyloid beta 4240 test? It comes up and says clearly the first word is no, you can't. So I was calling around and I finally got, after 10 doctors, got one doctor online who said, I'll do it. I don't care. Don't matter to me. It's your money.
Which
It's my money. And they did the test. And I'm the first person in the world who's gone up by 10% better on that test than anyone else.
yo,
Yes, I nailed it. I nailed it.
hell yeah.
I knew I had it. When I
Yeah.
got that test score back, I was so excited. The person who had it said, "Oh my gosh, you moved the bar." You know,
Did you go back to that first doctor and like, read this, you sucker?
I'm waiting to, trust me. I
Yeah.
want to move it a little further, and then really beat on them. My problem with doctors is, unfortunately, they just have a bad habit of just, they have two other people in the other room, you know how it is, and they got
Yeah.
that 7 minutes with you. And, they don't really, when I ask them about the glymphatic system, they had no idea what I was talking about. I'm like, you're a neurologist. Should know what it is. It's like, well, it's too new for me. I haven't read the reports. I just do what I do every day. And that's where we get
Fair.
stuck. And when I changed that test, when that test went up by that percentage, and by the way, at mybrainrestore.com, if you go to my journey, you will see all
Okay.
my medical tests. I post them all. I don't hold anything back. A
Right.
lot of
Yeah.
people don't want to show their medical information. I show it all. I don't care. It's all about showing what can be done. And
Yeah.
to me, that's important. And also your guests can go to the mybrainrestore.com, click on FAQ, and then click on free PDFs, and they can download my two new 2026 book for free.
Mm.
Okay. No charge at all. Your guys can go grab it and download it and read my story about Camp Lejeune, how I got here and how I beat the system. And
Gotcha.
that's what I really consider it, beating the system. And now I'm getting people from all over, not only all over the world, but all over the United States. I've been asked by the Michael J. Fox Group to speak down at Congress, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
We're still in talks about when that's going to take place. They need to stop talking about attacking every country on the planet. Try to focus else besides world domination. Hopefully they'll get around it.
Mhm.
But you did say unfiltered conversations.
Yeah, this is a unfiltered.
But for me, I think what has happened is a lot of people with Parkinson's, a lot of people with Alzheimer's, and a lot of caregivers have reached
Mm,
out to me. We're very open on our website. We take messages and we have our phone number there. People can call us. We don't have AI for the phone. If they don't get us, they get a message and we get back to them.
okay.
We enjoy talking to them because we really want them to quantify what they're doing. In other words, write down your worst situations, write down the problems you have, and then start taking this product. Wait 6 months, like I did, before you try to do a Michael J. Fox run, and see what you improve. If 10 is your worst and 0 is your best, then every 2 weeks, check that. Make sure you're taking the My Brain Restore every day, and it mixes in with pudding and it mixes in with yogurt. It's a powder. I think I showed a little earlier here. It's a powder form. So it's like this. It's a powder. And we made it that way because a lot of Parkinson's patients can't swallow pills. That's not easy.
And yep, and I was gonna ask that, then I realized I'm like, oh well, yeah, okay, I remember.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we had
So
to think
I do,
that when you're starting a company like this, you really have to think about what are all the variables.
yeah,
No.
and it brings me up to a good question for you. In taking this supplement, right, and helping restore your brain, is there anything that you should do, I guess, in conjunction with this that will help, I guess, get better results?
Very good question. Extremely good question. I had tried all the supplements and stuff that people said would work for these type of things. And
Mhm.
on their own, they didn't work because I had been taking them a year prior to that. I
Okay.
took them religiously, as every day. I probably took 5 or 6 different ones, they're all supposed to help. I was just getting worse.
Yeah.
So when I added this, I kind of stopped taking those to see purely would that work on its own. And
Yeah.
it did. But I've
Okay.
added some of those supplements back in because I do think they help
Yeah.
in certain ways, but they help in conjunction with the My
Mm,
Brain.
mm.
The other side is too the glymphatic system, which is sort of the key to this whole thing and what our product actually supports, which is that dishwasher of the brain, works at night. So if you take
Mm,
this in the afternoon or in the evening is better. And then when you sleep, even use a propped up pillow is a little
mhm,
more helpful because that's going to help that system naturally drain. So
mhm.
those are all things that I've done to try to make that situation more effective.
Okay.
And what I've noticed out of it is I'm a lot more refreshed in the morning. I'm a lot better off. And so all those things kind of, play together, to do that. But in the mice, they didn't do any of those things. They didn't give them any other supplements. They didn't require them to sleep on wedges.
Yeah.
They probably would have ate them. But the point is though that by using that wedge pillow, that helped,
Mhm.
I think, more. But that's it. Otherwise, no exercise, no riding bikes, no lifting weights, no nothing. This is
Wow.
designed for couch potatoes.
Okay, okay. And see that, so that that's that's simply amazing to me. So it brings up another question. So for me, so now you have this supplement. Now you're seeing these results, right? Has any big pharmaceutical companies reached out to you to help or to hinder you in your pursuit to basically restoring the brain?
Well, the interesting thing about that, and I won't name the names, okay, but they're big
Okay.
organizations and they are not pharmaceuticals. They are people raising money for different types of neurological issues.
Okay.
And you get a cold shoulder. And you get
Mm,
a cold shoulder because they want to do research and raise millions of dollars.
yeah.
And unfortunately, and I don't find this very comfortable actually in talking to them. And I've talked to many. They're like, hey, the attitude seems to be look, if your product works the way it works, I'm out of a job. I'm not going to
So
go raise millions of dollars this month. And that is a sad situation we put ourselves in. That there's a lot of nonprofits that, raising money for this and raising money for other things. And here we are in a situation where we've got something that interestingly enough, the original ideas came from them. They talked about this research. They had a 1 or 2 page, thing about the people in Japan doing research, but they didn't have the scientific journal, which took a while
Mm,
for me to go get. Okay, and find. But that to me is the unfortunate part. Michael J. Fox himself says, he'd love to shut down his organization and, completely win this. But I'm not sure that other organizations and other organizations that surround those groups feel the same way. They feel, let's just spend more money on big pharma, give them millions of dollars, and, it'll take them 10 years to develop something. That doesn't do me
yep,
any good. That doesn't
yep, and
do
then
anyone listening right now any good. It doesn't do any caregiver any good right now because
yeah,
they don't have anything to turn to.
wow,
And it's so unusual. I mean, to me at first, not now, but every time I do a podcast, it's interesting how the podcast guest or the podcaster afterwards always ask me, like, my friend has Parkinson's or my friend has Alzheimer's. Where do I get this from? I need to tell them about it.
yeah,
And I am meeting with a group very shortly next week with a very large group of concerned and interested, I would say, retired physicians
mhm,
that also have Parkinson's.
yeah,
And so they're looking at it from a different standpoint, more a
yeah,
humanitarian standpoint. In other words, I have it. I don't mind putting money into it and helping you and doing other things because, this is horrible for me. It's not about raising money to me. That's not their thing. We have to look at situations like, Apple, who had Steve Jobs.
yeah,
Steve Jobs got pancreatic cancer and died. He had all the money in the world. Couldn't stop it. Nowadays, there are people talking about reversing, you know, that type of disease.
yep, yep,
Well, these things come out of nowhere sometimes. And I think that's what I've found. I can't say it came out of nowhere. It took me a while. Like you said, I had to convert how much, the mice were getting and try to figure out, well, how much does that work equal into a human? And that came down to a lot of guesswork. You're
I
like,
bet, I bet,
yeah, yeah. You're like, oh, okay. But the nice thing is that no one's reported side effects with it. That's been a good thing. It is a fiber substance, so it does have a little bit of that metamucil sort of might give you some gas on the side, which is okay for you, but not good for your partner.
yeah,
As for the caregivers, I've had caregivers tell me, look, if you could just make my partner 10 or 20% better, I would be so happy.
yeah,
I would huge, huge, you know?
yeah,
But in actuality, the thing is, it might make them a whole lot. And I
mhm,
would love to get it into things like nursing homes in the United States, as you're probably well familiar with nursing. Nursing ratio is like 1 nurse to 10 patients.
yeah,
That does not work.
not at all, you can't give great care.
You can't give care. No.
Yeah, and my mother, she was a charge nurse for 34 years, and
Uh-huh.
then for, like, 4 years after she retired, to keep her license and everything else in the state of Florida, she worked at nursing homes, and she said she just couldn't do it anymore because it
Yeah.
was just so she's like, being a charge nurse at the, intensive care unit, it's a lot of work, right? She said, surprisingly enough, there was hardly any, I guess, good nurses to take care of people at these retirement homes.
That's
And
right.
so she was just overwhelmed. And that's so yeah. Wow.
Yeah. No, and my friend was taken care of by a hospice nurse, and
Mhm.
I know a hospice nurse and real well, a good friend, and she said, "You don't understand how many people I go out to see, and
Mhm.
sometimes the partner will go, is there anything you can give my partner that will make their life end a little quicker?" Because they're totally 100%, don't wanna do this anymore. And they're like, "No, I can't. I'm a hospice nurse.
Yeah.
No way am I getting involved in that." But the fact that they ask, you know,
Yeah.
shows the desperation of both the patient and the caregiver,
Yeah.
and I find this to be something that I tell people you've just gotta stick with. You've gotta really work on it. I can't tell you what things are gonna get better
Yeah.
faster than other things. We do have some anecdotal information coming back from patients saying, I get better strength quicker. One great story I had from also a physician, lady that's been a physician who had Parkinson's, and she would always walk down a nature trail holding on to her husband's hand because she couldn't let go because the nature trail was imbalanced, had rocks and things like that. But it was near her home. And she loved doing it. And she said, I started taking my brain restore and I took it for 3 months. And for some reason, I just felt the need to let go of his hand. And I did.
Uh,
And I walked all the way back home.
uh,
I did not need him for balance. And she goes, I never want to be without the medicine. And I'll
yeah,
never
yeah,
forget her because she went to another state during Christmas time and she said, oh my gosh, I forgot my medicine. Can you FedEx me some medicine? And I'm like, okay, yeah, but she was serious. I mean, when you find something that works, and
yeah,
people tend to stick with it very well because it's easy to take. It's not hard to
yeah.
take. You don't have to use yogurt all the time. You can use applesauce. You can put it in a smoothie as long as it's cold. And that's very, very important. A point I want to get across that even in the mouse experiments, they said if you tried to heat it as a tea or you bought the cooked version, which there is a cooked version of this, and they said it won't work at all. It doesn't function.
Uh,
So it had to be made in a special way, and we use special. I had to come up with my own technique of how to cool the mill down to get it to around 50 degrees and sometimes down to 40 degrees to mill things so that it would keep the elements, the oils and the volatile components.
everything intact. Okay.
Yeah, and that was the key, and it's one reason on our jar in here, well, we don't put the seal that you have to peel off because, any Alzheimer's person or I'm sorry, Parkinson's person's gotta get a pair of pliers to get this stupid thing off, and so what we do is a foam seal. So, by this foam seal, when you put it back down, it locks it back down
It's yeah, okay.
and refoams
Makes
it. It
sense. I
reseals
like
it.
that.
Most people don't use a foam seal. And that
Yeah,
costs us a little bit more, but our whole point is we need to preserve what those elements were because we have to understand in the mice experiments, they never figured out what they were. They knew that the natural ingredient worked. They knew it
uh,
worked if you didn't cook it. They knew if you put it in things cold, it worked. But when they got done and they tried to isolate the molecules, they tried those molecules, the mice didn't get better.
okay.
So it was a failed experiment, but sometimes a failed experiment comes to mean something.
Yeah,
Sometimes when
100%.
you're the Wright brothers, you only fly 200 feet and smack your plane into North Carolina sand. You sort of get back up there and let's get back in the air again.
Let's get it going. Let's get it going.
Keep
Yeah,
going.
and trust me, I'm with you, man. I am rooting for you. I'm rooting for your supplement. Also, I'm rooting for the support. And I know we live in a capitalistic society, especially when a lot of times people, they wanna put the dollar bill over everything, which the dollar is important. Don't get me wrong. And when I'm saying dollar, I'm not talking about the American dollar. Just talking about I understand that money is very, very important. But this is a work of love, and it should be something I personally think that we should be doing a lot more research on to help our individuals who have lived a lot longer than we have live a better and continued life. For me,
Yeah.
I was in Japan and me and a pastor was talking, and I love talking with him because he always said to me, he's like, I'm always around older people because when they die, it's like a library being burnt
Yeah.
down.
Yeah.
He said, and I want to soak up and I want to learn as much as I can so that I can pass on their library to my kids. I said,
Yeah.
man, that's an interesting way of thinking.
You
And
know,
so,
everyone's
yeah.
life experience, is that
Mhm.
library. There's
Yeah.
no doubt about that, and yeah, no, it's and I think that what's interesting about things like dementia and Alzheimer's is people can remember those past things and
Yeah.
say them. Like, oh, I remember this time we went on a ship and we did, and they'll tell the whole story. But then if you ask them, "What's my name?" they go, "I don't know." Well,
Yeah.
I'm your
Yeah.
son. "Oh, I don't know." So
Yeah.
it's weird how the short term memories get stopped, but the
Yeah.
long term memories are locked within.
In place. Yeah.
Part of that is also looking at that. What is causing those short-term memories to not work properly? And
Yeah.
so that was one thing I noticed because I'll tell you the frightening story that happened to me with
Yeah.
Alzheimer's. I was driving home. I had driven home down this same road for 20 years. And at one point, I took a turn I thought was the right turn for some reason. And I started driving all over the place. And I couldn't figure out how to get back home. This is roads I'd been down for 20 years
Yeah.
and I couldn't get back home. And of course, I'm too much a man, too much a Marine. Okay. I didn't press the button that says "Take me home, Google," okay, because I'm too manly. And and I'm just driving like a fool waiting to run out of gas.
Yeah.
But I made it back home, but it scared me to death.
I
It
bet.
scared me, frightened me, and to realize that, how could I not remember how to go home? How could I not do this? And you know, that has all changed now. I have those kind of problems. My memory's super sharp. Fall was here just recently and, and had to get up on I took the 20-foot ladder, got up on the gutter and just cleaned out the gutter. My wife comes out and said, "You out of your mind? You're going to fall down." And I said, "You know what? No, I'm not. I'm steady as a rock."
Yeah.
And I remember what to do.
I have a question for you, especially for my younger listeners. Like, taking this supplement, will that help them, especially with cognitive brain, to keep themselves, steady, especially when at times we forget, I'm 40 years old. And so sometimes I'll be like, oh, dang, what the heck? Like, what the heck? Like, so would your supplement help that as well, basically with cognitive brain function or?
Well, what was proven by the mice experiments? Absolutely yes. Because again, they used them on the control mice in the end, and they said they were able to run the maze 20% better. They were able to do the water test where they put them in water and they make them find a ladder and they have to figure out how to crawl out of the ladder, and they could do it 20% quicker.
Heck yeah.
There's two things going to come out of one's is already available. We have a preventive version, which is
Okay.
the same product in a smaller dose, but it is
Gotcha.
exactly the same. And it's just a different set of instructions you get in the 2X version. The one that I take, you get two of these, okay, jars. And in the preventive, you get one, okay,
Okay.
and that's a 30-day supply. But we're looking literally at coming out with, lack of a better term, a gaming version
Okay. Yeah.
for gamers that want to be sharper, for
Man.
people in college that want to take tests and be sharper, because basically the mice, experiments already proved that it can make the brain sharper by keeping that glymphatic system working better. So it
Yeah.
also means it's a preventive for those people that are genetically predisposed to these
Okay.
diseases. Yes, which a lot of people are. And there's a lot of money going into those amyloid beta 4042 tests. There's Parkinson's tests you can get now. There's one they're working on right now. It's a blood test for Parkinson's.
Mhm.
Mine was a little more invasive. I had to get a skin biopsy, but on my website, it actually shows the face of Parkinson's. It shows the misfolded tendril right there. The picture of it. Um, the idea is to get rid of those. The idea is to prevent those from getting stuck. So the preventive, what people are doing right now, we see a lot of people buying the preventive subscription,
Okay.
because that way it's filled each month. They get to take it. And, I've had people call me that get in this country Lyme disease, which, can cause problems, brain fog, long-term COVID. One of the most interesting things I've heard just recently was that the glymphatic system, they believe if it can be worked on and cleaned and has something, and again, they're not looking at the Japanese study, but they're
Yeah.
saying if you can
This
keep
is
that
separate, yeah.
clean, then we may be able to help football players and sports injuries that cause traumatic brain injury, because it would help clear those elements out of the brain quicker instead of them all getting stuck. So if we think
Yeah.
of it as a drain, and all of a sudden you have an injury, or in this case, you pour a bunch of oil and other things that shouldn't go down the drain, and it all gets stuck, how do you get it clear? If you get it clear, your drain works and everything starts functioning. So we feel the product will expand into many different areas because, again, it has a common component of that glymphatic system. So we do put on our website, we do put on Amazon, supports the glymphatic system. Again, I'll tell you, most doctors, if you go to them and say, I want something to support the glymphatic system, they'll say, you said that wrong. It's lymphatic. No, glymphatic.
Lymphatic system,
A
yep.
new one. I don't know what that is. Okay. But just because someone doesn't know what it is, if we look at history for a moment,
Yeah.
and we look at the British went around the world, trying to take it over.
They did.
Right. It spread whatever they were spreading, and as they went around the world in the sailing ships, eventually they started to get sick. The longer journeys they went on, the sicker they got. And I looked up the numbers on this. Actually, 2 million British soldiers died on the ships, and they didn't know why. 2 million over a 200-year period. You think of the realm of that time period. And then one, I'm not sure he was even a doctor, but he just said, I think this is because they're not getting fresh vegetables. So let's give them lemons. Let's give them limes. Okay.
Yeah.
And carry those on the boats. Once they did that, the 2 million soldiers didn't die anymore. And
Yep.
why did they call the British limeys? That's why. That's where
That's
they
pretty
got the
cool.
term, because that's what they took.
Man, this has been simply amazing. Looking forward, and as we, come to a close and wrap up, right?
Yeah.
Personally, and I will say, especially with your supplement, what are your next big goals and dreams you're pursuing with this? Saying you kind of gave it away a little bit when you was talking about trying to go into more of the preventive, and also get with hopefully some sports teams and sports leagues. NFL, we're talking about you,
Yeah. Yeah.
especially with CIT. But what do you see this going?
Well, I see it going in all those directions. I mean, certainly any sports team should look at it where they could have head injuries and things like that. I think anything in that order. Also, there's research being done on the glymphatic system for stroke victims. So again, if it can help them in different
Yeah.
ways, it's just very hard to get the normal doctors, if you will, out there to accept it. So it takes
Mhm.
more the person with the stroke, the person with that disease, to go, hey, wait a minute, I need to try something different because what I have isn't working. And they need to listen to podcasts like yours to get the word out, so they
Yes, sir.
understand, that there may be a way. And with minimal side effects, I mean, I can see a lot of people using it for different reasons,
Yeah.
you know.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Well, thank you so much, Mark, for being on the show. Thank you. Everybody, I need you guys to really, really go out to mybrainrestore.com. I'm on a website right now. He's not lying. He talks about it consistently. He's showing everything. He has the FAQs, everything out there. Man, I learned so much about this. And I want you guys to live long and healthy lives. So please, please support this product, support Mark in bridging the gap between the ignorance of doctors and just individuals who are scared, right? And let's do the research. Let's get ourselves those case studies even more defined so that we have it and we can stand up and do something great about this. So thank you, Mark, for being a pioneer. I know you're going through a lot, especially with everything, and we wish you not just safety, restored brain activity and health. And we glad that we got that 10%. Hopefully we get 20, 30, and 40. So
Oh
that's
yeah,
what we're
I'll
going
be
for.
there.
Yeah, yeah.
Site when I'm there. In the meantime, I'm
Yes, sir.
getting better. I'm gonna
Yes,
keep
sir.
cleaning the gutters.
Yeah. All right. You guys have a wonderful day. Unfiltered conversations. Love you guys. Y'all be safe.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.